one of the things that I found out, there's a new threat that it actually freezes and it puts like EDR and XDR solutions and scanners into a comatose state, so you can't even use it. It takes one of the like primary kernel files and then just disables it. So it's like it just takes out. Yeah, it's called EDR freeze tool. So you should definitely look it up. But it's just interesting, that these different threat vectors, it's not just affecting our infrastructure anymore. It's actually attacking the tools and the solutions that we use, which is it's cool. It's cool to see, Reed, because I'm like a big geek. I'm like a child, but then you're looking at it like, well, this is pretty scary. What SquareX is doing is they're an anomaly. I use that word very, very little, but it is. It's like you guys are the one, because it's not something everybody's doing, and it's such an area that I'd be the first to admit. Everybody thinks with EDR and XDR solutions, with all these different vendors, that this is covered, and it's not. So what SquareX is doing, what the platform's capable of, I thought it was amazing. What the solution's capable of, there's no limit to, right? And it fills those gaps that traditional EDR and XDR just don't hit. They don't account for. I mean, they're looking at it at such a high level overview, and the browser's just as important, right? That's been a threat vector that's been open for some time, and there's been nothing to fill that void or fill that gap of like, hey, we're gonna exploit that with a bad actor. Like, it's still a gateway into disrupting and destroying an infrastructure. Start with the foundations, right? You need to have the foundational skill set and tools, knowledge and experience to be able to get into those roles. So don't try to skip 5 or 6 steps. Take the proper path. Level up.
Joining us today is someone who's spent their better part of 2 decades navigating the complex world of networks and security. Girard Kavelines has become an industry voice as a Tech Field Day delegate and blogger at TechHouse570. His work has earned him recognition as a VMware vExpert and Cisco champion, and I'm excited to have him on the show. Great to have you on the Be Fearless podcast, Girard.
Listen, I'm honored to be here. I'm super excited. SquareX, listen, I'm still reeling from Security Field Day. I was pumped because there's a lot of cool stuff we'll get into, but I was floored. It was one of the presentations. And again, everybody who presented gave 200%, gave terrific presentations and great insights into their solutions. But SquareX was the one you could ask anybody. I was really, really looking forward to. So I'm excited to be here.
Great. Well, we'll touch on some of browser security here a little bit later in the podcast. But let's start with your career journey and your early foundations. You've had quite a diverse IT career, from help desk all the way through network security engineering. What was the turning point that drove you to focus on security?
For me, I've always loved security, right? Like, it started, to keep a long story short, when I started doing help desk, right, and kind of fixing computers, I worked in retail. I worked in a few different spaces and different mediums, and I was always big into different types of threats that were out there, right? Maybe not at the enterprise level because I was still green in my career, but, removing viruses, different types of malware threats, worms. And that's what really sucked me into the whole of security. That's how I knew I really love security. And that's where I got started from. And I'd be lying. I mean, that's where it was, like troubleshooting the hardware software aspect of it and fixing machines was always fun. But I loved when something came in and had an infection or had a virus, or because then I could just dive into my own little world and go into that rabbit hole of security. So for me, that was the key area. I was like, this is the part of IT I want to work in. Where that's going to lead, I didn't know, but I knew that's where I started. So I've obviously branched out from there.
Yeah. So I started my career in IT kind of help desk kind of world, in network engineering as well. I think back in the late 80s, I had my own little company where I was doing some IT consulting, but it ended up just being really kind of like help desk kind of stuff for little companies that were in the Houston area.
Right.
And then, my first job was as on the help desk at Apple, and not like internal, but like external customers. And just listening and talking to customers all the time kind of gives you kind of a sense of like what's happening on their screens and everything else, and gave me some empathy for like what users would kind of go through. Yeah. But then later on, I was, I went to IBM and did a lot of solution architecture, but did that network engineering work as well. I was deep in IT before I got into security. I didn't really ever think about security, but then all of a sudden I was having to secure systems.
Yeah.
And then just learning about it, just reading through like the DISA STIG so I could secure a system and doing all this work around it, it actually became pretty interesting to me. And then I actually had an attack on my own system that I was using to do things with. And then I was having to troubleshoot it. And then that's when I got hooked. It was the hook of like investigating it and seeing
seeing the threat back, like seeing the threat in real time do its thing.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. It was very much like, wow, this crap is working,
Yeah.
and it's like, I can see what's happening.
Well, I think the coolest part too is to piggyback off what you said. That's how it started for me on, like I said, like the computer repair side, was with viruses and worms and Stuxnet virus. You see all these different types of things, and I start researching. And then when something came in, then it was scareware, right? When it was like fake AV. But then as I gradually, and I'm very fortunate to, as I went up to each level in my career, then I started diving into the security world on that side, right? Okay, so this is like the help desk, IT repair side. Now I'm looking at it from a server side. Now we're looking at it from the network side. So even 20 years or so later, I still have that love and that passion, that fire for the security world, but it's just at a higher, like at a different, level, like nothing changed. I'm still a big child when a new threat comes out. I'm like, I have to figure out more about it. Matter of fact, I'm not going to go too far into it, but one of the things that I found out, there's a new threat that it actually freezes and it puts like EDR and XDR solutions and scanners into a comatose state. So you can't even use it. It takes one of the like primary kernel files and then just disables it. So it's like, it just takes out. Yeah, it's called a EDR freeze tool. So you should definitely look it up. But it's just interesting, that these different threat vectors, it's not just affecting our infrastructure anymore. It's actually attacking the tools and the solutions that we use, which is it's cool. It's cool to see, Reed, because I'm like a big geek. I'm like a child, but then you're looking at it like, well, this is pretty scary. So.
No, absolutely. I think that folks, think that both on the attack side and the defense side, it's somewhat linear, like something, there is kind of a mental map of different kinds of technologies and everything and that are out there for like a defensive strategy, and attackers on their side have to kind of figure out how to navigate it and find weaknesses in that strategy and kind of attack them. And then as a defender, you're kind of going back through and saying, hey, what's going on here? And it is very much a give and take kind of activity, right? So it doesn't surprise me that there's a tool that's freezing EDR. It's just another way of like defensive evasion, right?
Exactly.
But it's interesting how novel, attackers are, and how nimble defenders have to be as well.
Yeah, and they're getting more sophisticated each and every day. So now they're out there. This is what they're doing. We're here hanging out, having a good chat, and they're getting ready to figure out how they're going to make our lives harder. So
absolutely. You're also a writer at TechHouse570. Yep. What was the inspiration behind it, and what are some of the topics you write about?
So I'm fortunate, and now too, keep in mind, one thing I want to point out, it started off, a few years ago, a little before COVID hit, and then some. I've always been, I was in English. I wouldn't say an English major, but English was like my go-to subject. Math, and I was a little weak in it, but English was what I loved. So I always loved writing, and I always loved technology. And a little before COVID hit, I just, we had our first baby. I just needed an outlet to relax. And I was like, what are two things that I love? I love to write, and I love technology. I had the 570 LLC, and the rest was history, right? I put together a site, detailed it. I'm very OCD, so that's one thing that's like big for me. And I put out my first 2 blogs, and I was like, we'll see. I didn't even know there was an IT community out there. I'm fortunate to be a part of it years later, but I wasn't even aware that there were other people out there who were not just making content, but wanted to share their knowledge. And it's just everything that was important to me. So I wrote a blog or 2 and I put it out there, and I'm like, I hope people like this, and hopefully they don't, crap on it. And they didn't. It was the actual polar opposite. They were welcoming. They loved my content. They loved what I was making. That led into, more blogs and then more blogs. And then I became a Cisco champion, part of these amazing technical evangelist programs that, again, help the IT community, whether you're a seasoned IT professional, somebody who's new or a novice, or somebody who's just getting into IT and doesn't really know where to go. Like, there's groups now, right? There's a full-fledged community, people like myself and other amazing content creators out there. And it just blew up. I've gotten to work with a lot of great companies. I've also been fortunate now. Last few years or so, I've done podcasts such as this one. And I also make short form and long form content on social media, videos, giveaways, some funny stuff. I mean, you name it, I do it. And it's just to help the next generation. So, as the IT world is changing and growing, especially with new, threat vectors and AI being, the hot topic and the cool thing, it's you want to be able to give back and impart your knowledge, right? So I write about a lot of technologies, focusing on some of the core areas that I've been working on the last 15, 20 years. So networking, security, and virtualization, because I also do have data center experience, but it's also a lot of general rules on how to grow in business. It's also how to survive, the help desk. Because some people maybe frown upon the help desk, and everybody's had a different career path, and I respect every one of them. And everybody has a different journey and a story, right? But I think for me, I resonate too with a lot of people who are doing the help desk because they're like, man, I feel like I'm stuck, or I'm getting burnt out, or I don't really know how to take those next few steps to, propel in my career. So the last for years or so. And even now continuing on, I make content to kind of show them like, hey, it's short, it's consumable, and you can get out of there, right? You have to level up, and this is how to do it. So I've been fortunate to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people think that there's the help desk part of your journey. Yeah. It's very useful. In the long run, you're going to look back on that and you're going to think, wow, that was actually pretty helpful in how I navigate X or Y or Z later on in your career. But, I think that at the time, like when I was doing, just like you were saying, is I kind of felt stuck. I didn't feel like it was very interesting, but at the very beginning, I did think it was interesting, just like everyone, you kind of start with a deficit in your knowledge and how you work through that, and then you kind of build up your knowledge, and then you're, kind of able to do the job really well, right? You have the interest and the capabilities to kind of do what it is that you need to do in that job. And then, as you kind of progress, it stops being fulfilling. And at that point, you've got to figure out like, hey, what are you going to do? Right. And what's that next step? Now, if you just keep going back day in and day out and you go in, you trudge through the help desk role or whatever that role is, it doesn't matter if it's a help desk or security ops.
I have friends who were cabling, wiring vendors,
wiring, exactly.
ISP, and they were working, overnight on the knock. Like they've done all kinds of roles, and everybody's path is different. But for me, and I think it's a matter of perspective too. I apologize, John. I didn't mean to cut you off. I just think it's a matter of perspective, right? Like you have to stay hungry and you have to stay passionate, right? It's more than just obtaining certifications. Like that's astronomically important, but I feel like kind of married with coupling the certifications, you have to have that passion, right? Like you have to be wanting to ask the senior level engineers, depending on your role and what you're doing, like, hey, is there project work that I can shadow on? I tell people this all the time, hands-on, lab, be it virtual, physical, a mix of both. Because just me, I'm a physical learner. I need to actually touch the gear, configure it. I need to be in the trenches, configuring the stuff, you know what I mean? Troubleshooting it, seeing why it's not working. Like that's that hunger. And I feel like as long as you have that among those few other qualities, good personality, that's what kind of helps makes you stand out. Another thing too is it's again the perspective piece. Working on the help desk is great, but the cool part is like if you store that knowledge, when you move up, let's say to a data center engineer, or you move into a network engineering role, now you're looking at it from the flip side of the coin, right? So you know how the end user, and that's kind of what I've done my whole career, and I still do. Like I remember, and I still do. Like okay, well this is from the help desk end user side, from the moment the endpoint connects to the network, how it go, how the server, how the data center piece ties in, and then you get to see it at each layer. So it helps you from not only a troubleshooting perspective, but gives you more depth as an engineer or IT professional. So again, it's just, I guess, a matter of how you look at it.
No, absolutely. And I think that perspective matters. I think, as a CISO, there have been many times where my team wanted to do something like, hey, let's go do X or Y or Z. Let's go make every user do this thing. And, and I can just listen to it. And I'm like, yeah, that's going to drive like 5,000 calls to the help desk, So what's our answer going to be to the help desk? But I know that because I was on the help desk.
Exactly. Thank you. That's just like you just hit the nail right on the head. You just drove the point home. Yeah. You can make more educated and conscientious decisions at that level. Never been a CISO, maybe one day, but you get it. It doesn't matter what level, you get it. And you're just like, no, I don't want to do that. They're like, why? Well, this is work. Like, yeah, but here's the thing. I've been on that side, and I wouldn't want to get flooded with 5,000 or more calls. So you can make more proactive decisions and more, better
user-friendly. Make better user-friendly decisions, right? And I think that it doesn't matter what you're doing. You get to understand what that perspective, and that perspective you can bring forward into your later parts of your career. Like it's not wasted work for sure, right?
Yeah, it's more than just how it's going to impact the business. It's how it's going to impact the end user and the line of businesses, and you just want to keep them all happy. I get it.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear more about your, behind the scenes stories and your blogging journey, right? Because it's kind of interesting, it's like you posted a couple of pieces, you got a lot of feedback. People are in different parts of their journey and you're trying to help them out. Was there a particular post or topic that resonated with your audience in an unexpected way?
Well, I can't say one in particular, but there was a few, and I'll give you some loose examples, but ones that kind of, when I initially started, I wrote a CCNA series, right? And again, I have some of my great friends, like number one, he's an amazing content creator. I want to give a shout out to Kevin Nans because he makes awesome stuff. And he just did a CCNA. He does like also short form content, amazing stuff. And I had written a blog at the time. This was before I got into like the video world and podcasting and all of that. But I made a CCNA series, and I did, I was getting a lot of feedback, a lot of emails. People were like, thank you. I'm just, getting ready to sit for my exam or studying for it, and some good study tips. Another big one that I think has resonated, and I'm actually going to be doing kind of like a new perspective or vantage point on it. So I'll give you a sneak peek. Is I'm going to be sharing, and from a different, video and camera angle and perspective type view, is being an IT professional, having 6 kids. Because for those that don't know, a lot of people in the community know me. I have 6 children. It's never a dull moment in my house, right? I have an 11, 10, a 6, 5, 4, and a 1.5-year-old. So it's like, everybody asks the same question, how do you find time to study? And so I think like kind of like a day in the life, like an overview to see, because that's imperative. And I got a lot of great feedback on that. Because again, it goes back to not just the technical stuff. That's always phenomenal. It's what we love, but it's also like the human side of who we are. It's making sure, we maintain good mental health, maintain our sanity, because at the end of the day, troubleshooting these problems, and again, everybody views it differently. Everybody has a different approach to it, right? For me, you have to maintain that balance of studying, professional work, and then your family time, because like one can't suffer. Now, family time especially can't suffer. It's got to be about family first. But for me, I feel like those are kind of the 2 things, like my CCNA series and a lot of the family stuff, like good study tips, habits, how to balance, work, family life. Like those are the ones I'd say the last few years I've gotten a lot of good feedback on, especially because it's relatable, right? I mean, some people don't have kids, but the ones that do, it's a struggle. It's a struggle to try to sit there and maintain. It's easy to say I'm going to study for 2 or 3 hours over the weekend, but when then you blink and you got baseball or football and life engagements, things come up. So I think you got to have that happy medium in order to make it all work.
Yeah. So it does sound like that your blogging work is complementary to your professional work as a network security engineer. It sounds like for you, it's somewhat of an outlet for like getting your ideas out there, but does it really complement your profession, the blogging work and everything?
Yeah. And even now more so too, whether I'm writing a blog or, as I said, making videos has been kind of the last few years. That's been that's the thing, right? Because, it's a way we consume content, but I always make sure it's relatable to topics or things that I'm dealing with. I have a bunch of stuff ready that I have to edit, but one of the things is, as I encounter things in the field or I encounter things in the wild, it's relatable and it's real things that as engineers we might forget about, right? Like I just did a video, I didn't release it yet, I have to edit it, but I, did a video on setting a static IP on, a Meraki MX device, because of the thing of it is, if you don't have it set to forwarding, then it's not going to forward the traffic, and then it causes problems. But again, that's a prime example of something I deal with in the real world. So you make it short, you make it relatable, and you make it to the point. I think that's the best way, because people will consume it better. They go, oh, I just dealt with that last week, right? Or studying
dealing with it right now,
right? Exactly. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think as long as it's relatable, and again, the same thing, like my favorite 6 tips for surviving the help desk. Everybody's like, well, how do I get off the help desk? What do you mean survive it? And then you read it, it's like, oh, wait a minute, I deal with this. Wait, I deal with that too. So I think it's a great way to engage with people, and it just makes a lot of sense.
Great. Well, I think that I think it's great. Having content that's relatable. It's one of the things that I kind of aspire to, is like, hey, how can I kind of share my journey and such? Like, you're giving me some good ideas. So I appreciate it. Yeah. Shorter, like just make it TikTok themed, right? We talk about this in enterprise security, like how do we build awareness? And we always have these like training programs that people go on for like 30 minutes. They have like tests at the end and everything else. And we think that's building awareness. I really do think that we'd build better awareness if we just had little memes and stuff like that we were just posting out. It would probably be more impactful over the long term than just, once a year having that, security awareness training.
Yeah.
It's security awareness month, cybersecurity awareness month right now. So
little by little, it keeps you there. And then also, like I said, people are like, I relate to that, like I'm just dealing with this crap right now. So it's funny. And, it's just something that, again, it's engaging, and it makes you have those conversations if you're not having them already with your audience. So.
Sure. Well, you attended our Tech Field Day presentation on browser detection and response. What was your takeaway from the event? And how do you see browser security challenges playing out in enterprises you work with?
Well, I could narrow it down in 2 words, but I have more. Friggin' awesome. Like I said, shout out to all the presenters. They did great, but you could ask any delegate that was in that room. I was like, weeks leading up to it. My friend Sarah was also a fellow delegate on that panel, and I had said to her, I said, this is the one, like, this is the one I'm really, because again, it's that security element, right? And I think that without question, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but what SquareX is doing is they're an anomaly. I use that word very, very little, but it is. It's like you guys are the one, because it's not something everybody's doing. And it's such an area that I'd be the first to admit, everybody thinks with EDR and XDR solutions, with all these different vendors, that this is covered, and it's not. So what SquareX is doing, what the platform's capable of, I thought it was amazing. I've been looking more into it to see how we could incorporate it and maybe into some of our clients day to day. So fingers crossed. But no, I thought the presentation was spectacular. I look forward to seeing y'all present again at a future field day event, hopefully one that I'm at, and we can really kind of expand upon that. But what the solution's capable of, there's no limit to, right? And it fills those gaps that traditional EDR and XDR just don't hit. They don't account for. I mean, they're looking at it at such a high level overview, and the browser's just as important, right? That's been a threat vector that's been open for some time, and there's been nothing to fill that void or fill that gap of like, hey, we're gonna exploit that with a bad actor. Like, it's still a gateway into disrupting and destroying an infrastructure. So I'm a huge fan of it.
Yeah. So I think that, for sure, one of the reasons, I kind of decided to join SquareX was because, as a CISO, I had been defending networks for many years, even military networks back in early 2000s. And
I saw that. That's impressive. That's amazing.
Thank you. But I also was very stuck on operating systems and end user activities and, how attacks were happening and how my proxies and my SWGs and my CASB tools are helping me defend and my EDR tools. But then we had like a intellectual property protection program at my last role that had like 144 elements that we were trying to control.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, we did this like SaaS audit, to see like how many SaaS products do we have and how they're configured and everything else. And I was shocked at how many gaps I had on how I could protect our data that was going to these SaaS apps, right? Yeah. Like what could I protect in the browser? Because all of a sudden everyone's using the browser as this portal to get to the capabilities that they're using in an IT and enterprise environment. Yeah. Which was a big shift that I didn't really see. And then the second part is that I thought that we had it pretty well covered. And, the audit showed up that there was we had like 230 apps that were covered with our conditional access policies and SSO and MFA. But it turned out that I had 640 other apps that were part of a Shadow SaaS environment that I didn't even know we had. Right. And thank God I did an audit. But it's like all of a sudden it was like, how are people using this? And for me, it all came down to the browser. So when I met, Vivek, the founder, and we started talking about, browser detection, and I'm a very technical guy. So I was asking him all sorts of questions because I had just been going through Purview and all these other kinds of tools about how they were going to work and how Netscape was going to work and everything else was going to help me defend. And I kept seeing gaps. And then I started talking to Vivek, and all of a sudden he's like telling me how these were going to be fixed. And I was like blown away. So I became this advocate for SquareX because it's just such a huge vector that no one really sees. And, as a network engineer, that a lot of times we used to have like IDSs and IPSs, and we're controlling the perimeter security all the time, right? We had certificates pinned so we could see the, unencrypt the traffic as it was passing, so we could see what was going on, so we could defend. And now, and I saw this in like 2015, 2016, that we started seeing a lot of point-to-point encryption with like Diffie-Hellman encryption between the end user system and the SaaS product.
Yeah.
And our IDS and IPSs, when I worked at an MSSP, we weren't able to see that traffic, right? We couldn't pin it so we could see it anymore. So we had these really big gaps in the end user environments because we just couldn't see what was going on. Yeah,
traditional browser security, we're a long way from home from that. That's gone.
Yeah,
that was years ago. How you leverage the browser it's changed so drastically and radically.
Agreed. And I think it's just accelerating because the cloud is there, more SaaS apps. Browsers are becoming more capable. And I think that the only two places that we can really see what's going on in the browser is in the browser on the end user side or on the server side. We as IT consumers and the enterprise, we don't have access to our SaaS product servers, right? So we're hoping that they're doing something on their side to protect things. But as an enterprise, we need to have visibility in the browser where our users are working,
right?
So that we can do that detection. So it sounds like something that you were excited about as well. right?
Oh yeah. Well, again, it goes back to, as I said, from the help desk days to working in a data center to now being a network and security engineer. Like I see all three pieces of it, right? So I look at the like grand scheme of things, and I'm like, holy crap! Like that's a problem. I've known it's a problem, but wow, we didn't know this existed. So I was like, my brain, like like everything was just shooting off. Like during the presentation, I was like, what? Like and I'm still just as excited about it. So.
Yeah. So when you're consulting with teams about their security posture, what are the most browser-based threats that you're underestimating? So you're working with folks. You went to the Tech Day event. You see this kind of technology that's able to help secure your browser, right? But you're working with people. So do you have like a sense of those browser-based threats that are being underestimated?
I mean, I think now what it is more so too, where you have a sense of them, but you don't really know. For me, I'm somebody like, let's bring it up, but if we need to have a solution, right? We need to have something in place where now moving forward, if and when I have those conversations, like again, SquareX is right at the forefront because again, it's a piece of the puzzle that was missing, in my opinion, for so long. And the best part is too, is you're in an arena where this isn't something everybody does because everybody overlooks it. So I think that's what makes it so important. Right? Because you can just tailor focus on different type of threat vectors and different types of threats that are out there and different type of exploits that can take over some of just the day-to-day browsers we use like Edge, Chrome, Firefox, and again, also at the server level. Now, depending on your role, if you're siloed to the data center team or if you're kind of jack of all trades, master of none, how much visibility you're going to get into that is going to vary from team to team. But either way, I think this is something that having those conversations kind of like when you're doing an audit or you're doing an audit of some type of security environment, you can present this to them, at least me, and I can be like, hey, listen, these are some gaps and this has become a new part of the conversation. So that's what I like to engage in because a lot of the customers are like, really? I wasn't aware of that. I wasn't aware that this is a thing. And then, you lead them down that path of like, well, this is how we can fix that.
Yeah. I think that when I'm thinking about it, right, this isn't an area that a lot of people have been focused on is client-side browser-based threats that are happening in your environment. I don't think people are thinking about it that greatly. I think we're starting to, right? People are starting to, and we see different kinds of solutions out there that are trying to secure content, and we've been doing this for a long time, securing what's on the wire, trying to detect threats on the wire. I think with the advent of just point-to-point encryption and everything else, where we can't really see anything anymore, and we just have so many of them, I think it's just more difficult.
Yeah.
But when I look at like Mandiant's report, like their 2024 report, or I see Palo Alto's report or the Verizon DBIR, and I start looking at those threats, I kind of look at them in a different way today than I did prior, right? Because, I look at the, brute forcing attack surface is a password problem now. And I say, but when I look at those reports, I think like 70, 80% of those attacks that resulted in a breach at the companies that they're working with.
Yeah.
At least 78% like traversed the browser or they were related to the browser in some way. Right. So
your viewpoint changes.
My viewpoint changes. Right. Exactly. And it's like, it's, and to some degree, I'm looking to say, hey, how do we keep these threats off of the network? Right. Or how do we keep ourselves from not being a victim of these kinds of attacks, even as something as simple as like brute force, right? Which you don't think of as a browser problem. Right. Yeah. But for you to sign into that website and create an account and credentials that was then brute force and, you lost access to your data, you had a weak password or you weren't using SSO, or you weren't using MFA, but to get to that site, you used a browser. So if you have a tool like SquareX where you can go in there and you can say, hey, don't use weak passwords, don't use passwords that are, have already been pwned, right? Don't duplicate passwords that you use in different places. And you could put that kind of control in your end user environment so that they're not able to do that work. Then your risks of brute force attacks or account takeover attacks in different places where your data is go dramatically down. If you can control OAuth consents where you're, some product that you don't have as part of your portfolio in your IT environment, and you can say either one, you can use this list and have a white list of applications that can be used.
Right.
Or if you're not going to go those kinds of control and you just want to say, look, we're allowing you to do X or Y or Z with respect to your OAuth consents that you're giving that application that are low risk, then there's ways that you can allow people to have some flexibility in what they're doing in the SaaS world. But constraining their activity to something that's, safer, right? Or even extensions that you're downloading. Which extensions are you downloading into the browser that are gonna augment the capabilities of your system? That's great. We want you to be more effective in your sales and marketing activities or whatever activities that you're working with. But how can we do that in a safe way where we're not giving up excessive control to your system with, at that place? And then the one that's killing us right now, or I think is on the path to killing us, is the Gen AI in the browser, right? AI in the browser, right? Where you're in the browser and you're asking AI to go do something for you. You have a browser AI agent doing something for you, and they're using your credentials to sign up to different SaaS apps to do the activity. And you want to control that as well, right? There's so many little threat vectors that are happening in the browser that are controllable if you think about like what's actually happening in there, right?
Yeah. And it makes you wonder too, because, and this is, again, I've worked in a few different industries like healthcare, right? Like, how is that working? Because in healthcare, you have HIPAA compliance and laws, especially you have to be very careful with a lot of that, because now you're not just opening yourself up from, an attack surface and threat vector perspective, but then are you violating any laws with that? And in turn, now that's sensitive data that may be picking up along with your credentials and is just right there out in the wide open, for just for the taking. So there's just a few different ways to look at it, right? Especially from governance and it's just like you're just shooting fish in a barrel like type deal. It's not good.
Yeah. So again, I think part of my mission on the podcast is just to make people aware, right? To kind of think about it from a bit of a perspective. You helping me, kind of navigate that as well.
Secure your browsers. Use SquareX. There you go.
Secure your browsers, right? Use SquareX. We're here.
Be smart.
Take a look at our product. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about the job market. In a lot of press, I think we're seeing that the job market isn't exactly good right now. For our listeners looking for new roles or joining the field, what's your best advice for them?
The best advice for them has always been the best piece of advice I've given people I've mentored or been fortunate to help and still do. Focus on leveling up, right? Focus on cloud. Cloud is another big area right now, because it can be said, a lot of people are like, well, being a network engineer may not be the coolest thing. And like, again, obviously I'm biased to that because I think it is, but everybody has a different perspective. But what they need to understand is all the cool jobs and roles like cybersecurity analyst and cybersecurity. When you hear those cool words, you need to understand that, start with the foundations, right? You need to have the foundational skill set and tools, knowledge and experience to be able to get into those roles. So don't try to skip 5 or 6 steps. Take the proper path, level up. Lab. That's the biggest thing I can say is if you're fortunate enough to be in a role like a level 1, level 2 help desk role or service desk role, that's going to be your window to lab, invest in gear, study for your certifications, like level up in any area you can, because again, you need to find the area that's going to be the best fit for you, that makes you comfortable. Because that's another thing too, right? Is people will see these roles and they make 6-7 figures and like, well, that's great, but they don't understand what it is at that level because they haven't, as I said, they've jumped the other 5 or 6 steps. So leveling up is the best piece of advice that I can tell anybody, right? Lab, study when you have free time, gain the experience, gain the certifications, ask if there's a project you can work on internally with the senior level engineers. Any opportunity you can get to put your foot in the door, take it. And you got to run with it.
Yeah, I'm often surprised at people that get like cybersecurity degrees and then they get into the industry and then they don't really know anything about IT, which is what it is that we're protecting.
Right.
And then you kind of like move into troubleshooting, like, because when a lot of what we do in security is, it feels like troubleshooting, meaning that you're looking at a problem and it's a different perspective. It's maybe it didn't cause an outage, but you have something that's going on in your network, and being able to navigate like what, security equipment you have and what kind of servers do you have in your environment. How does information get from one side of the network to inside your network, and being able to piece all of that together. You need to understand IT, you need to understand networks and systems so that you can be a good analyst, even in those like L1 kind of SOC roles.
Yeah.
So I think that definitely going through the basics and understanding the basics has a lot to do with you doing good security work.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's like, you got to bring passion to it, right? It's like, you're going to have work-life balance issues, right? And you're going to have to make a trade-off between spending time with your family and studying and trying to level up in your career. But if you don't have passion to bring to it, it's really kind of hard to find that energy to stop doom scrolling on your TikTok.
And look, I don't think I've ever said this, but I'd be lying if I didn't say, look, sometimes sacrifices are needed, but it's like a short-term thing for a long-term goal, so you have to be able to make the right decisions and do what's best for you. And if you have a family, but sometimes sacrifice is needed, but yeah, you have to be passionate. You have to wake up every day, right? We got things that we got to be fortunate about. You got to look at it with a clear mind and a good perspective. If you go into any situation, even now when I'm troubleshooting something, it's like, listen, I'm gonna figure out why packet A is not going to packet, why it's not going across this network. I'm gonna figure it the hell out. But that's the difference between bringing that energy, bringing the love for what we do, and then just not having it. If you're in it to make money and you have nothing else, I say to anybody, money's great. That comes over time, but the experience, everything else, that's where the richness is. Like, that's where genuity and who you are as an engineer and a professional is going to come from. People see that. So
yeah, I think the other thing that you brought up earlier is just community, right?
Yeah.
It's just be involved in the community. I mean, I think your aspect of it is like, being a thought leader, blogger, podcaster, kind of going into that, and sharing your experience with the community, which brings you into the community, makes you a leader inside the community. But I think community matters as well. I think that, folks need to get out there and be passionate and touch base with the community, whether it's in a B-sides or a cybersecurity event or something, kind of get involved, because I think more opportunities come through people than they do through,
They do. It's all about your network. Yeah, the more you know, and there's tons of networking user groups and events, and like there's multiple opportunities and ways outside of there's LinkedIn and Twitter, and now TikTok. I mean, that there's a huge community of IT professionals, cybersecurity professionals, no matter what flavor of the industry or area you're looking to grow and get into. Like, there's somebody out there, someone who's sharing this knowledge for you to follow and to listen to.
Great. And my last question for you: you've built expertise, earned recognition, and stayed connected to the community. What's next for you? Where do you want to take your career or your voice in the industry?
I always take it one day at a time. As far as my career, moving into, bigger architect roles, design roles, because that's obviously a passion. While I love it, something I've added more to the toolbox. It's an area I definitely want to explore more. But as far as making content, I can't share too much, but what I can say is I'm working on something right now that I think is going to help shape the industry, and not just me, but other fellow content creators out there. It's going to be a way to kind of give back, move forward. I always have some new projects working, and I got the gears spinning on a couple things. Right now, I've been coaching my son the last few months in football, so I've had some stuff on the back burner, but it's definitely something here over the next week or two I can really get back to and start sharing with the community again, to let everybody see some of the fun stuff I've been working on. So for me, it's just growing my platform, being able to help my voice all across the globe, reaching as many people as I can, and just letting them know, like, network engineering is cool. IT is cool. There is a lot of fun stuff here, and this is a path you want to be on. So you'll be seeing a lot of fun stuff from me in the next few weeks.
Awesome. Girard, thanks for being on the show.
Listen, thank you for having me. It was an honor and a pleasure. Hopefully we get to talk soon again.
Thanks, Girard.
Thanks, y'all.